enhance learning using pages. So it's myself, Laura, and Damian and Matt. We're all Apple Distinguished Educators. Myself and Damian from St Stuyvesant School, and Matt is from University of South Wales. And we're going to look at today how we can use the app Pages to develop blended learning, as well as enhancing opportunities for learners, as well as teacher resources. So the session outcomes today that we'll be aiming for is how you can enhance pupil understanding using Pages, what pedagogical approaches do we need to consider, how can the use of Pages support blended learning, and develop the understanding of Pages and its functions. So if we look at some data that's been done, 28% of pupils will remember information if they've just written it down. So if they've copied down some words, this is what they tend to remember. However, if they apply drawing to this and use drawing as a skill to help them remember the information, they are more likely to retain 49.5% of the information. So as well as looking at the use of audio and video, there will be an element with some drawing in there today with sketchnoting also. So it's looking at the power really of how other formats can help pupils develop their understanding of work and enhance also, so it'll just help them to understand more. So some of the things you might think about is what barriers do you face? But rather than thinking of the barriers that you face and whether it's not what the exam board expects, a few times we've heard about people discussing how they need to practice handwriting, and this is really important. However, if we were looking at the understanding element, are there ways that you can help people to understand content better and help them to process that information better? So it's all about changing mindset and thinking about what opportunities do you have. Rather than thinking of what barriers are in the way, what can you do to help pupils develop? So today we're going to be looking at these elements in Pages and looking at how they can enhance learning. So we're going to learn about audio recording, so that could be used for teachers or for pupils, use of video, photos and image galleries, drawing and annotations, and also accessibility. So there's functions on the iPad that are already built in. We're able to turn on for text to be read out to pupils. So this will be particularly useful for maybe pupils who aren't sure how words are said. It could be useful for pupils with EAL. I may need some support with understanding the content, and other pupils as well if they're having difficulty to access the language within the document. I'm going to go over to Matt.
Hi everyone. Okay, so I'm just going to take a look through just some pedagogical approaches that we need to consider. I'm going to start with Bloom's. I'm sure everybody's aware of Bloom's and what Bloom's offers us in terms of deepening the understanding. Laura, if you just kind of fly through the animations here. We know that in terms of learning, we want to move our students from this low level of remembering content and drive them up towards the create element. Because we know that when you create something that is new or original with the information that you've been provided with, it demonstrates a fuller and deeper understanding of the content. We see this in students taking on the role as teachers, because if you can explain to somebody else what you've learned, it demonstrates obviously a fuller understanding of what you've done yourself. So where we look at creativity here, we're not just simply looking at creating something for no purpose. We're looking at how do we integrate that creativity into the lessons that we have. This statistic here comes from a Gallup survey around creativity and learning carried out last year. And as you can see here, it reflects on the fact that teachers understand that transformative use of technology helps students to better connect their understanding of what they're learning to the real world. And I think when we look at 81%, that's a really high figure. But we need to focus really on what do we mean by transformative learning? What is it that actually transforms the use of technology as opposed to just replicating? If you haven't heard of SAMR before, SAMR model refers to substitution, augmentation, modification, and redefinition. And what this identifies, if you look towards the M and the R section of this, is what do we mean by transformation? And we're moving away from simple substitution of a traditional approach. So for instance, if we were making notes on a piece of paper, we could also make those notes on a digital device. But fundamentally, we haven't changed anything in the approach. We're just changing the device that we use. Instead of paper, we might use an iPad, and instead of a pencil, we might use a stylus. But what we also gain from that, from having that information on a digital device, is the fact that some functional improvement will be there, rather than having to have just one pencil in one color. If I use the stylus on an iPad, for instance, I have a range of colors and thickness of pens, etc. It hasn't necessarily changed anything, but it does enhance the interaction that I might have with that device. If we then look to what do we mean by transformation, it's when we actually completely change what we do as a result. I've got an example I'm going to show a little bit later in terms of a worksheet that my son was provided with, a really, really nice process of transition. He's moving from year 6 to year 7, and it was a way for the school to engage. But what we did, mostly because I am an Apple educator and I saw a way to do something slightly different, was redesign the task so you had multiple ways to access that information. It was a Word document. It was designed to be filled in, traditionally using a typewriter function on the device. But we had to look differently of how he might access that. He doesn't tend to type very much, so therefore if he was typing it would take him ages and he would lose engagement and lose focus. So we look to enhance it to say, okay, we'll just write on it instead, or use your voice, or add pictures. And instantly, the barrier to him completing a task is not in his ability or his skill set to perform the task, which actually means the outcome represents what he's done in a new way. If we then look at what could be seen as the pinnacle of this, that totally new approach under redefinition, we're going through that at the moment. We're going through a phase of education that has, not been seen before. We're all at home. I know, obviously, in Wales, we've gone back to school this week, or students have gone back to school in some part, and in small groups. But things have changed hugely into how we've interacted with them over the last 3 months, and that's where technology can redefine learning. I hear a lot of talk about going back to normal and having things back as they were before. And I would question, do we really want to go back to how things were before in every case? Because there will be a huge percentage of your students who, although miss the social interaction with both you and their peers, have benefited from an alternative approach to learning, and the way technology can support them with that through just alternative ways to interact with each other and a teacher. And if we were to integrate Vygotsky's zones of proximal development, who the experts are in the room with them. So that's really kind of my integration on, why the pedagogical approach is important, why we start with that before we look at what we do with the technology. And back over to you guys for the how we do it.
Thanks, Matt. So the next stage that we're going to look at now is pages for content creation, but also pages for workflow. So the content creation is looking at what you as a teacher can create and what you can do in order to enhance the content that the pupils digest. And then we're going to look at pages for workflow with how the pupils can utilize this and develop maybe journals or workbooks and different things like this. So a few questions I want you to consider is, how might you develop your resources to be used for blended learning? And what may allow students to develop a deeper understanding and mastery of the skills they require to succeed? So what we're going to do now, I'm going to show you an example of a pages booklet I'm currently working on. Matt will share with you some work that his son has been doing, and Damian will share with you some examples as well of how he's developed use of pages within his subject area. So this is something that I've been developing, which is a literacy book for year 7, and using the concept of the virtual classroom, which you've probably seen on Twitter. So the idea with this book is that each section of the classroom has got links attached to it. So for example, if I clicked on the Day of the Dead link, it'll take me to a website which will give me some information from National Geographic about the Day of the Dead. So it's directing pupils to specific areas which they can, in which they can, sorry, I know some of you are not able to see it at the moment. Can you see the Pages document now? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I can't help you with that.
So, so for example, if I click on the Day of the Dead, as I just mentioned, that will take them directly to a website. So if I just click on Open Link, it will take them through then to do some further reading into the Day of the Dead. So there's different things that they can learn there. There's other areas then, if they click onto the skeleton, there's a link which will take them then to go to page 3, which is the Day of the Dead information. So within here, I've included a knowledge organizer, which we're starting to develop within our school. There's also a video then of the Day of the Dead. It's an animation about the Day of the Dead, so they're able to watch that and interact with that. And in addition to this, I've recorded some audio, which is me saying the words that are in the knowledge organizer. And then that allows them to understand how these words are said, particularly with them being Spanish words linked to the Day of the Dead. It helps them to develop just the verbal element of it. This will lead into then as well exploring media materials. So the idea with this book is that Year 7 will be able to download it and have it on their iBooks, on their iPads, and have this resource to access, which then the teachers can use to develop lessons and blended learning approaches. So it allows them to be a little bit more independent. So the idea being, I'm going to be working with my colleague to maybe look at developing videos that can link into this to help pupils as well. I'm going to switch you over now to Matt.
This is transition booklet that my son's school sent out to him. Apologies, this is Chepstow because that's where we are. I know you guys probably do some fantastic things as well. So it's not a critique on the content or what it is, but it's just an example of how we modified what came to us as a Word document and then turning it into more of an interactive book within Pages. It just positioned it in a way that he could interact with it in a different way. So rather than having to go onto the computer, find pictures, save the pictures to somewhere, he was able to actually just add his pictures directly onto the book itself. So rather than worrying too much about the IT process, he was just able to complete the tasks. We also, in this section here, it actually came to us as kind of like a PDF document. So therefore typing directly onto it wasn't easy. Plus typing slows my son down. He's used to writing things. We want to try to develop his handwriting skills as well. So through using the Apple Pencil or a stylus, he was able to just write directly onto the screen itself and have that documented. And you'll see kind of, that kind of access just enables him to use the document in a very different way without the technology being an obstacle to anything that he was doing. That's one example. The other example I just quickly wanted to show is this one here. This similarly, it's my son's book and very similar to what Laura just showed. This is his learning journal. Usually it came to us as a series of task activities, but again, I adapted it and turned it into an interactive book that enabled him choice. And that was the key thing for me. He might want to type directly onto it. He might want to write pictures. He might want to record his voice. And the benefit of using Pages to create this is he has spaces to do whatever he wants. I'm not going to share his actual one because he's still working on it, so he was a bit private about it. But what I've simply done is the task is set out here. This is what the school asked him to do. But he has access, and we'll show you this in a second, to a range of ways to add content. For example, on this page, it's about a debate, similar to what Laura just shared. Here's the link to additional information. And he might want to write his answers, but he also might just want to record his voice, which means access is there for him to document in a way that works for him. He might have some really detailed views on what he wants to say about this topic, but if he can't spell some of those words, he might be reluctant to write them down. So therefore being able to add his voice means that I can still hear his thought process, I can still understand what he's thinking, and not judge him just on his ability to write or his punctuation or his spelling. I'm not saying that's not important, but equally it is not the be all and end all. So the whole book kind of goes through different kind of approaches to that, you know, elements of where you can add in photos, elements where it might just be a drag and drop. So in this case, it's him keeping check of whether he's done his spelling shed activities each day. So this is just a case of, you know, just tick the boxes to say that you've completed a week. And you can see there's just a range of different kind of modes of being able to add in the work that he's done. So that's just a couple of examples of how to use that.
Okay, so going back to the start, really, we've had a lot of time with lockdown. So one of my tasks has been to sort of revamp some of my old documents. Now, the document that you can see on the left here is an old Word processed document, but the content was fine. But what I wanted to try and do was to sort of put in a format that we've been using with all our other books. So Pages was a perfect example for this. So using Pages, you can see if I just scroll down here, all I've done is use the tools within Pages to produce a more visual sort of resource for the students to work through. Now, I've also put together with the resource a workbook for them to produce the homework on. Okay, so using the same sort of theme, we've now got homework questions which they would work through, and like Matt was just explaining, we've got a template here now where they can write about what the key facts from the circuits that we've been teaching within that resource, where they can either type or they can use their Apple Pencil. Now, also, I would want them to put a keynote about how the circuit works in this area, and I then want them to add their voice and describe how that circuit works. So if I just show you an example. So this is the keynote here to show how the circuit works. So it's a way that I can understand then, that they understand in the learning process. And then here they can listen to, they can tell me.
During the day, the resistance of the LDR is low and the voltage signal is also low. When it's dark, the resistance of the LDR increases, and as it rises, so does the voltage signal.
So within that little resource there, and the template that we provided in Pages, they're showing me that they can draw the circuit, and they're also describing to me that they can understand the process of how the circuit works. Now, the sort of theme that I'm trying to achieve with all this, I'm trying to produce some templates so that all the books are looking the same throughout. Now, the best place that, you know, if you were struggling to put these together, is just simply do a new page and use the templates from Pages itself. Or, you know, in time, then you can start to create your sort of backgrounds. It's very, very quick and very, very easy. For those of you who are not Apple teachers, if you go into the Apple Teacher homepage, you will find all the information in here to help you, you know, to help you produce your templates, to add photos to audio. But also, if you are an Apple teacher, it's always great to pop into these sections because of the new updates and so on. And then it'll maybe jog your memory from when you did do your Apple Teacher badges. Right, well, you know, let's have a look at how I put photos in, or audio or video. It's always an excellent place just to drop back in and have a look how other sort of teachers and educators have created their books. So I would always recommend dropping back into that section to help you develop your work. The quick, you know, the more often that you use these sort of resources, the quicker you get at it, and you'll find that you can put a book together, an interactive book with audio, with video, so much quicker that you'll be so surprised how easy they are to learn.
Thanks, Damian. Okay, so I'm going to show you we're going to have a quick look now at using pages to be able to create our own book. So this is going to be a bit more of an interactive part. So if you have got a device, or if you're able to do it on the device that you're on at the moment, you can follow with me step by step on how to do some of the basic things within pages. So first of all, if we just look at the shapes and like the icons at the top. So pages, keynote, numbers, they're all exactly the same. So if you click on the plus sign, this is where you add video, you can add photographs, you can create image galleries, you can record audio, and there's also a drawing section there. The paintbrush, so that is your format, so that's your edit, and so it's really useful just to remember those two signs. If you want to change your type of text, different things like that, you always go to the paintbrush. If you want to add things in, you click on the add. I'm now going to switch over to my iPad because it will be easier for me to be able to demo this to you on my iPad. So if you'd like to go to pages, if you have an iPad or iPhone or anything available to you, and you will be presented with this page. So you can choose templates, which I would recommend as well because they've got some really lovely outlines. But in addition to that, you've got basic. So basic is your standard word processing document. So it's something like Word. You've got reports, and then you've got books. So it's the books that we're going to be focusing on. And you've got loads of different examples of different types of templates that you can use. I'm just going to choose the textbook one. So you're able to see how the different layouts work. And you've also got where you can add in pictures, you can add in text. And if you click on the plus in the bottom corners, it takes you straight to your photographs. But what we're going to do, we're going to start off with a blank page. And we're going to click on the plus. And we're going to start off by adding in some photos. So I'm going to add in, as I'm an art teacher, a lovely piece of artwork by one of my students. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add in audio. So I think what I might do is explain why my portrait's red. So pupils can use this for self-assessment, they can use it for explanations, they can use it for any way. So all you need to do is click on record, and then it will record whatever you say. At the moment, Zoom is taking over my record function. And then once you've done the recording, it will usually a little microphone comes up and it can be placed anywhere on the page. For drawing, if you click on drawing, you've got different options. So you've got smart annotation, which you can use to annotate different images. So really useful for subjects like science or geography and different things like that. But these are the drawing tools. So if you click on the drawing tool, you've got different thicknesses. You've got a pencil, crayon, a fill tool, and a rubber. And then you've got some lovely options here for choosing different colours. And pupils can draw things. They can write notes on there. And then these can be used to annotate things. Another thing they can do is add in shapes. So you have loads of different options. So you've got some three-dimensional shapes. You've got different things that they can use maybe for storytelling. Also to help they do all coding. So using the imagery to go with text in order to enhance the understanding. So there's loads of different options there that they can add in as well and can adjust with the colour. So if I add in my little builder, to edit the colour, I always go on to the paintbrush, and then you can just choose your different styles. So you can add in gradients as well. There's all sorts you can do on there. You can also arrange to move them front to back, flip them around. So there's loads of different options for you. One thing that always stumped me was where the text box was, and it's actually in shapes and it's at the very beginning. So if you need to add in additional text boxes, that's the way to do it. In addition to that, you can add in image galleries where you can put multiple images in, and then they can just drag and drop into there. Another good way of doing that is that you can use split screen. So if you drag it from the corner and drag it over, if I Google for Michael Craig Martin, as that was the artist that inspired my pupils' work, you can use in split screen, you can then literally drag and drop the images onto the document. So this is a really quick way for pupils to be able to develop their projects without having to look for images. One thing I would say though is being aware of copyright, and particularly with the DCF, this is something that pupils need to consider. Think about using maybe content from websites like Pixabay. So that's, I'll show you that now. Pixabay is a really good website where you're able to get royalty-free images to use within presentations and that pupils can use to make sure they don't break copyright rules. So that is how to add audio, how to add video, how to add text and annotations and different shapes. When exporting the book, you always click on the 3 little dots, and this goes for any exporting within any Apple products. And if you export it as an EPUB, that will develop into a book which can be stored in Apple Books on the iPad or on the Mac. Okay, if I go back to the presentation. Matt, would you like to take over from you?
Yeah, thanks, Laura. Okay, so one of the key things that we wanted to share about the role of technology here is that we're very keen to highlight that access to learning should be for all. And I think what's highlighted, I was on a webinar yesterday, and one of the figures that came out from some global research is that of the 100% of students you have at any one time, 20% are engaged and see the purpose of education and see that it's a way forward for them, and that's based on the traditional approaches that we've had. 40% are there but don't feel education is for them, and the final 40% have switched off, which accounts really for a lot of the percentages that we look at across school in terms of that A to C grading that we've traditionally had, and how many students actually achieve at the end of the year. What has changed massively in the last 3 months is that 40% in the middle that kind of engaged with school but didn't feel that traditional approaches for them have noted that they've actually found a new way to engage in school because technology allowed them to engage in a very different way. And so if we think about that as a global kind of issue, and we think about how technology has supported those students to re-engage, the reason they've re-engaged is because they've been given choice in what they do and when they do it. A key book that I've been reading recently, which I would urge anybody to read, is Drive by Daniel Pink. And it really talks about that concept of what motivates us to do things when you take away a threat of reward and punishment. And I think where students have been at home and largely, left to their own devices to all intents and purposes, not to say that not getting support from school or from parents, but they've also had to adapt to be a lot more independent. What is it that's caused some students to engage and others not engage? And I think through choice, you see a different approach for students in some regards. I think the aspect that we've seen in lots of these books, the use of video that allows students to revisit things. I use this as an example usually with maths teachers that I work with, because I see maths teachers talking through process, and students don't always understand this the first time. And then the teacher has to go over the same process again and again and again. And I think if you record yourself doing that process once and allow students to review that video as many times as they want, it frees up the teacher to have time to go and support in other ways, and allows the student the independence to know where to find that additional support. So, creating video, yes, it's great for blended learning, but let's not forget that that's equally as valid when the students are back in the classroom with you. And then if we finally look at this application to real world use, the world has changed hugely in the last 3 months. We've seen everybody's gone digital, everybody's had to work from home and adopt a digital approach. And I think now is a great opportunity for us to demonstrate to our students what that actually looks like, why digital approaches are good, but also where that need for face time and social interaction with other people is equally as valid. So they can understand the role of technology in the real world, and it not be something that I've used quite a lot recently, a nicety anymore. It's actually taking it to be a necessity for how we might communicate and how we can operate in the world beyond our own schools or our own communities. Do you want to move on there, Laura?
Yeah.
So if we then have a look at the blended learning approach, these are just kind of questions to really pose for people to consider as we go forward. Obviously, in the next 3 weeks, 2.5 weeks, we're looking at a blended learning approach where students are with us for a period of time, and then at home and thinking about how does that work. So how does this support learners when we're actually still in school, so that we can learn from these lessons in the next few weeks? Something that I suppose in Wales we hugely benefit from is a chance to try out some approaches, because we don't know what September is going to bring, and we don't know how long we might need to think about a blended learning approach. But also let's think about how that might actually change education. How does it meet the needs of the new curriculum and the principles that are underpinning that new curriculum about creative, self-driven learners, that we want them to be understanding of content, but also understand how that fits into the real world? How does this support teachers in understanding learner misconceptions? I go back to the maths example, and seeing the answer on a page doesn't necessarily show you the problem that that student faced in getting to that answer, or how they got to the answer. If you actually hear their voice recorded talking about the process, you can unpick and support them in a very different way. And then finally, do you know what access your students have to technology at home? Now, I know the majority of people on this call are from St Cyries, and the fact that you are a one-to-one iPad school means that you overcome that issue straight away, which means you have that opportunity to deliver the content to the students in a way that you know how they'll access it, that they'll have the correct access, and guide them in how that you can support them in how they deliver the content back to you. I suppose the one thing that you may or may not know, and I'm sure you do, is how they access that in terms of through the Wi-Fi. But definitely some things to consider going forward.
If you want to take a screenshot of this particular page as well, so you can use the QR code then to access the Apple Teacher.
So within the Apple Teacher page, obviously for those of you who are already Apple teachers, we've had to earn our badges to learn about all the different types of software there is, such as Keynote, GarageBand, and obviously Pages. If you click on the Pages file itself, okay, this is what I was taking you to earlier. Within here, then, you've got all the different types of skills, which we can then develop as we go along and as we become a bit more confident with our progress within Pages. So if I just click on templates, for example, so if you started with a template, it will take you through just the real basics of what is a template and how to get started. So if I just click on the side here, they give you sort of basic examples of projects which you can learn and develop as you go along. Now, each skill is there in real easy detail to follow, and you could very, very quickly become quite an expert in those sessions. So again, this is on the main Apple Teacher website, which you'll have to log into, and whatever type of skill you want to develop. For example, if it was just adding photographs, you just work your way through the resources there, and they're really easy to follow, but they're also good to use. What we've found is that they're good to use for the student. So instead of developing your own resources and your own sort of how-tos, they're already there for you. So I'm just going to share something different. Right, so one of the skills that we've been developing recently is how to use Keynote for drawing, basically, and we've been exploring the use of Keynote as a drawing tool. So with obviously the lockdown and everything, we've been looking at, well, in September, perhaps we won't be able to do our after school clubs, our classes, where traditionally we've done these things. So what we've been putting together is these books have been created in Pages, and what we've been doing is using Apple clips to teach the basics within our Pages group. Are you able to see a video running now?
Yeah, it's playing.
Okay. So what this allows me to do now, I can push this book out as an EPUB. My students can get this booklet, and then they will work through the tutorials that I've created in this book to develop their skills using Keynote. Now, everything within this book, again, this has been put together using Pages. Now, the templates that you get in Pages, it will give you, if you go to File and New, it will give you the options of recent basic reports and so on. Can you make sure if you write in a book to go into the book's template itself, and what that allows you to do then, it gives you sections. So for example, at the start here, I've got my drawing techniques as the first section, then adding color, and then completed examples at the end. Now, when you export that as an EPUB, it just gives you a really nice sort of breakdown of the different sections within your book. Okay, so that's an example of how we are using Pages and blended learning, and looking, towards September and beyond, really. Again, you've got video in there. Some will have audio. So with some of the other subject areas that we're going to be teaching, I'm going to be sort of recording my own voice to describe how things work, how things function. But for the graphical processes, this is quite an easy and a nice way to use Pages to put my workbooks together.
Okay, Matt, if you don't mind sharing with everyone as well the information about the Apple Education series that's happening at the moment.
Yeah, so you may or may not be aware of a series of webinars that are being hosted by Apple in the UK, which focus specifically on some of these measures that you can use. Again, they just top up your knowledge about the range of approaches that you can undertake through using Apple technology, the accessibility features that you gain from using some of the technology, which obviously if we have students working at a distance from us is critical, because we don't always know that the support is going to be at home for them at all times of day when they might be needing to work. So having things like speak selection on the screen obviously enables them to understand certain words that they might not be able to read, and obviously take that further if they want to find out definitions of those words, etc. as well. So these are free sessions that are going on at the moment. You simply just can scan this QR code and you can get straight into those sessions and book onto those webinars. They're about 45 minutes to an hour long, and just give you that overview of some of the updates that Apple have come out with over the last few months in terms of support, but also some things that you just might not have ever been aware of that you can do on your device.
Okay, so that's the end of the session, guys. If you'd like to pose any questions, please add them in the chat. Alex, I know I'm in the middle of replying to you, so I'll finish that. And if anybody's got any other questions as well, please ask them now.
I'll answer some of these live. So there's one question here about sharing templates. I have some of the books that I've made as templates that I am more than happy to share out to people. If you follow us on South Wales RTC, or if you follow any of us individually, if I tweet this out later, then you can pick this up on Twitter. I'll also endeavour in the next 5 minutes to quickly find the link and stick it into the chat section as well, so you can be able to find it directly there. Something else to just highlight whilst we're on this screen is I have over the last few months been creating a video resource bank through YouTube, which just entails lots of different things that you can do with your iPad through lots of the different free apps that you have. You can scan the QR code and go to that, or if you just go onto YouTube and just type in Think Creative TV or type in my name, you'll get there. There's over 100 videos on there about various different things that you can do, some around creation of ebooks, but also some just around other things that you can do with your iPad.
Ria, unfortunately, this doesn't work with Windows, as it's Apple's version of like Word, so it's only on Apple devices.
You can, however, though, just to add to that, if you have an iCloud account, you can do this through the browser. It's a slightly different experience, obviously, because you're doing it on a computer, so you do lack the functionality of having a camera, and you might not have the audio recording functionalities on your device. But if you log into iCloud.com, you do have the access to create books on a Windows PC as well.
Sarah, there's a way of writing onto the books. You can use that through the smart annotation. You can also add comments, and you can also add verbal feedback through the audio as well. So that's the way that you could mark it. And Dave, they are going to be updating some of the widgets. Matt, do you know any more about this?
No, usually in typical Apple fashion, it's coming soon.
But there's going to be quite a few updates, Dave, with the new iOS coming out in the fall, and they are making developments. So hopefully some of those different widgets will come over. A few of them have already made their way over. So, for example, like the video's already open to full screen when you play them. Yeah, Gareth, I am recording this and I can email it out. Any other questions? If there are no more questions now, feel free to contact myself, Damien, or Matt on Twitter. Obviously, those are St. Cyrus School. You can just email us. Yeah, and if you need any more support with anything, please drop us a DM or message on Twitter. Thank you.